Um, I have also seen the impact and the change it can make when just a little interest and effort is put towards safety and pushing that awareness out there. So I'm grateful that I'm able to bring a little bit of awareness and training and push that out to as many people as we can to help all of us be able to go home at the end of the day.
Hey Lisa, are you
Yeah.
able to enlarge the slide that you're on because we can see like the next slide in the notes. I think there's
Oh,
maybe like
yes.
presentation mode.
Yes. Sorry, I should have
Okay.
checked that. Let me do this. How's that?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
So sorry.
No
So
worries.
sorry. Um, Anyway, so keeping going, I do want to talk about three components that we will talk about today. Those are gaining education, step two, developing, maintaining systems and processes, and third, establishing a safety culture. And again, hopefully, as we talk about some of these things, you'll see it really is as easy as one, two, three. Safety can get a bad rap, does get a bad rap. I recognize it can be confusing. There are lots of rules and requirements and regulations, and it does take some effort. It does take some investment into that. But it's also something that can be done in, excuse me, bite-sized pieces. There's lots of help and resources that are out there that are available to anyone. A lot of those resources, they're also available for pretty low cost uh, opportunities. When we talk about gaining education, we have to start off with knowing what we need to do. And I know a lot of times I've heard, well, ignorance is bliss. If I just don't think about it, if I don't talk about it, it will be fine. But as we talk about safety, ignorance is not bliss. And saying, I don't know, isn't always a good solution and actually can cause some problems for you down the road. Because if something does happen and you just say, oh, but I don't even think about that anymore, it's past, and then that happens to repeat, that now becomes a willful violation and has some more serious consequences and some increased penalties. So, understanding what those requirements are, what those rules and regulations are, um, gives you power. And when we have knowledge, we have power. And when we train and help others get education, we're empowering them. And that adds to their confidence and their abilities and also starts building that safety team so that everyone's on board to help and make sure that a workplace is safe. Um, when you attend training, you meet other people, you make connections, they become resources for you. It introduces you not only to other individuals that you can make connections with, but it also helps you to recognize some of the other locations that you can look for getting some of those resources and that. There are third-party trainers and consultants, and there are, like I was saying, free opportunities. There are obviously some charging or trainings that have some cost associated with them. And I think sometimes companies can be overwhelmed with the fact that I have to send everyone to get trained, and that isn't always the case. Being able to send a couple of people that can get some training and then
Yeah,
can bring that back,
this thing is weird.
can bring that information back and are able to share that with other individuals that are in the organization. As I said, not everyone needs to come to training or sent out to training, paid for training. You can always, identify one or two individuals that are interested in safety or in, more responsibility and send them to get some training and then have them come back and help. And, that allows more folks to get that information and it kind of gives individuals that opportunity to then pass that on. And as we teach and we explain what those rules and those regulations are, what those hazards are, that helps to develop them as an individual, but also helps them to understand those things. Having knowledge and being aware of those hazards also helps to be proactive in recognizing what some of those hazards are that can prevent injuries, that can prevent accidents, and also fatalities. Also being aware of what that, or having that information, having that knowledge helps us to be aware of what some of the common factors are for incidents in construction. There is lots of information out there as to what those common incidents are that happen in the different industries, construction specifically, and recognizing what we can do to avoid some of those as we learn from others as we gain that knowledge. Um, as we have that knowledge and we're able to apply things, it also helps in improved compliance, reducing legal risks and that potential of fines and consequences for having those not being in compliance with the rules and regulations and standards. Also, when we have a reduced amount of incidences and compliance issues, that does impact us financially as a company as far as cost savings, medical expenses for injuries, insurance premiums. All of those things are impacted by implementing safety programs and making that a solid justification of why we should be involved in safety and looking at how we can make our company safer. And so now we have that knowledge. What do we do with it? So as we move into our next step, we're going to take that knowledge and we're going to develop and maintain systems and processes. Once we develop a process, that doesn't mean that it always is, it becomes stagnant and we never look at it again. We just follow it. There always is that opportunity for evolution and improvement. And sometimes as we move from site to site, looking at different projects, locations, sometimes we do need to tweak and adjust that process to make that apply to the project that we're working on. As we look at developing those systems, there's 4 steps in that. The first is establishing a process. What does that look like? What are the things that we need to be aware of? And what are those processes we're going to be putting in place? Having an order that makes sense so that people can follow it and it's very clear. Once we've established that process, the next thing is to make people aware of what the process is. If we don't, if workers don't know what the process is, it's really hard to be able to follow that process. And in that process, and making people aware, that helps to improve the environment and the safety of that as we're looking at our different job sites and that. Excuse me. And then as we are implementing that process, helping others on the job site understand what that is, it helps to improve the environment and the morale. No one wants to go to a work site or a place of work where they are worried that they might get hurt or worse, pass away. So making sure that that environment is safe and helping employees to recognize that is a safe place to work and that the employer does care about them and is following the requirements that they have will help them to be more positive about going to work and not having that concern and that fear. With any process and with any of these things, we need to make sure that that's documented. And once we have that process put together and it's established, we would go back to step 1 and we would train all of the employees on that so they understand what that process looks like and how they fit into that process. The value of having a systems and processes in place is everyone's on the same page. Everyone knows what to do and how to respond to something. In the case of an incident, that process would lay out who is the one responsible for calling 911, who is or whatever emergency services that there might need to be in place. Who is the one to secure the scene? Who is the one to care for the injured worker? All of those things can be built into that process to help people know what to do. I went through the process of, if something happens, but on the preventative side, when we look at, whose responsibility is or who is tasked with ensuring that the tools are safe for that day. Who's tasked with making sure that changes or hazards that have developed and are new for that day are getting passed throughout all of the individuals that are on site, so that they're all aware of those things. So thinking through what is those operational efficiencies of how do we make sure that we are communicating and keeping everyone on the same page. When those are built into the process, we don't have to worry about meeting the requirements as far as record keeping or reporting or proper PPE or any of those things because they're already built into that process and they already are just part of that flow that we have now established. And we've also trained and taught individuals on how that process works. And so everyone knows what that works in. It also helps to aid in communication. If one job site has certain policies and another site has different way of doing things, switching back and forth between job sites can be confusing. And if there's a process in place for a company and those things follow the same patterns, that also helps then for that communication across job sites. It also helps employees and employers to understand the individual responsibilities of each one. What is the employer's responsibilities in that process of keeping workers safe? And what are the responsibilities of the employee to help keep the site and the other employees safe as they're going through their daily activities and responsibilities. So having that process in place, understanding what that looks like, and that's a bigger process as far as the documentation and the forms and the different things that we're utilizing to keep track of those processes, of those hazards, of any incidences, so that we're aware of those to help us to continually move into our third step, which is establishing a safety culture. Establishing a safety culture helps to provide a safe environment and helps to protect the company as well as the employee. This is something that doesn't just happen overnight. This is not just something that happens on one site. This is something that is throughout the entire company. And it's something that workers and employers have to work together to build. Establishing a safety culture is something that is thought about in every step of the process. So putting safety in your bids, keeping safety in your everyday activities, and then that continually builds that culture, that process as you start from even just the inception of a project, the thought of having a project to completion. Again, all of these things kind of go back and forth as a circle of cycling. Because once you have that culture, then you're again going back to step one and step two and training and explaining those processes and improving upon those processes as your company becomes safer. And so we've talked about these three steps of training, setting up a process and procedures, and maintaining that process, and then moving into that establishing a culture. Excuse me. Um, and so as we're doing that, that culture is breeding a safe place for individuals to work. It's increasing the morale. It increases productivity because those processes are in place that helps that productivity to be there as well as that safety, which then reduces the interruptions and the disruptions that incidents causes. And that isn't necessarily always just someone getting hurt. That can be a near miss where something almost happens that still impacts the productivity and the flow of work as that's happening. As that safety culture grows, it sets you apart as a company. It gives you a stronger reputation and also then reduces risk to owners and company. Also to employees of knowing, this is a company that cares about me. This is a company that, I want to keep working for because it is obvious that they care and they want a safe place um, for people to work at. As I was mentioning earlier, lots of resources. I did say a little bit about the OSHA Education Center, but moving into a little bit more, we are an education center, so indicative of the name, we do training. As I said, we are through a competitive process. OSHA has selected ASU as one of their premier training partners to help push out training in specific areas. We do lots of different topic training. We cover the standards course, which 1926 standards that oversee the construction industry. We also oversee the OSHA 10 and 30 hour program that many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with. What that looks like is we're training those trainers and helping to make sure that students get those cards as quickly as they can. And helping to, again, just push out that information for training and helping to give people the knowledge that they need to help keep their sites safe. When we talk about, keeping the site safe, we have to obviously include that regulatory aspect, which here in the state of Arizona is the Division of Occupational Safety and Health, also known as ADOSH, that has two separate offices for compliance and consultation. Another great resource for some information. We are residing in the San Francisco region. And because we have ADOSH, we don't get a lot of compliance side of things from the region, but they do still have jurisdiction over the federal workers that are here, as well as working with our tribal communities. Both of those places are great resources, again, to get some additional resource and training. Hopefully, you all are aware of the resources available through the Register of Contractors that does have some information available as well. But there also are some additional safety focused organizations and associations that also have some safety committees and some safety information that is out there and available. And um, with that, and we'll open it up to questions. And before I do that, just as a way to help kind of kickstart you all, we do have a half a day record keeping class coming up October 15th, and pushing that out with a discount. That's usually a $200 class or $175 class. But for those that are on the call today, if you go to our website, which is osha.asu.edu, and look at that class, again, it's OSHA 7845. There is a special registration discount for the Register of Contractors, and it's really got to know some history. The discount code is 1931, which is when the contractors group was established here in Arizona. And so that will be open and available for anyone that is interested in kickstarting their path down and trying to understand a little bit more on what requirements there are on record keeping and how to make sure that your company is in compliance. So with that, I don't know if there's any questions.